The story of Fall of Albaz has 178 cards depicting the characters, the events, and the places the story takes place in. And in this video series, we're going to cover all of them and look at how card names, the artwork, and of course the effects influence the story and tell it card by card. The first official card in the lore, you would think, might be Nadir Servant, but that's not true. We get an establishing shot of the city of Dogmatica with the card Dogmatica Nation. And this does tell us a little bit about the people who live in Dogmatica. Neither player can target Dogmatica monsters you control with the effects of monsters that was special summoned from the extra deck. This tells us a little bit about the culture of that Dogmatica religion, and sort of to say that they're not really welcoming to outsiders who do not share their faith. And this is why you'll see this occurring in a lot of the cards in the Dogmatica archetype. They pretty much hate the extra deck. We're introduced to Dogmatica Ecclesia, who is the virtuous one. She's the promised one. She's gonna take over the church someday, and she possesses really amazing secret powers of communicating with dragons. In the art of Nadir Servant, we can see Ecclesia and Fleur-de-Lis, the Knighted, standing on a balcony outside of the Dogmatica church, looking at the sky as a huge dragon-like figure falls from the sky on fire. This is how the story begins, with the fall of Albaz from some magical realm of dragons that we're not currently sure what actually happens there. We're also introduced to the Dogmatica Nexus, which is a huge statue of two dragons in the center of the church, and this is what the people of Dogmatica worship. And it's also a monster in the game. It cannot be normal or special summoned, and it must be special summoned by its own effect by targeting 4 fusion, synchro, exis, and or link monsters in either graveyard, and you can special summon this card. If you do, you banish those in the grave. This is similar to Maximus as well. At the start of the damage step, if this card battles a special summoned monster, destroy all your opponent's attack position monsters, and you burn them from 800 for each fusion, synchro, exis, or link monster destroyed by this effect. So it's not really useful, it's more of a flavor card to show how the Dogmatica treat the outsider. And after that, of course, we have Maximus. Maximus is able to also banish a fusion, synchro, link, or exis monster from the graveyard, and it's also able to send 2 monsters from each extra deck. After that, we have Dogmatica Fleur-de-Lis, the Knighted, who is probably Maximus's second-in-command, chief of his guard, and eventually the one who has to fight Albaz. And lastly, 2 other members of the tribe are Theo and Aiden. Theo is definitely the muscle of the group, and Aiden is probably a preacher or some sort of a religious figure in Dogmatica Nation. The action starts with Dogmatica Punishment. You can see Fleur-de-Lis striking down a dragon. This is the dragon that fell down from the sky in the art of Nadir Servant. And as you know, because this card is extremely popular, it's a trap card that targets a face-up monster your opponent controls. You send a monster with an equal or higher attack from your extra deck to the graveyard, and if you do, you destroy that monster. This is essentially how the Dogmatica use their power to fight the ones that they considered sinners. And of course, this locks you out of the extra deck, and this is true for a lot of the Dogmatica effects. The dragon that is slain in the art of Dogmatica Punishment is of course Titaniclad, the Ash Dragon. Titaniclad is technically the first Albaz fusion monster we see in this story, and it requires Fall of Albaz in 1 monster with 2500 attack or more, which is true for a lot of the Dogmaticas, like Fleur-de-Lis for example. But it's pretty likely that this is a fusion of Fall of Albaz and the Dogmatica Nexus, considering they also look quite similar. Now, each one of the Albaz fusion monsters has something to do with the tribe or the people that Albaz meets through that part of the story. So here, it is the Dogmatica people, and at the end phase, you can special summon or add to your hand either Albaz or a Dogmatica monster. So every time you see Albaz or some sort of monster in one of Albaz's fusion monsters' effect, you can consider those to be fused together for this fusion to happen. And this card, Titaniclad, is also, of course, immune and unaffected by the activated effects of any monster special summoned from the extra deck, which is in line with how the Dogmatica people see the world. And after striking down the dragon, a boy appears in the dust, which is the Fall of Albaz. And of course, it is very easy to see that Fall of Albaz fuses with other things throughout the story, and this is why his effect is so crucial to the story itself. By discarding 1 card, you can fuse with an opponent's monster to make a new one and throughout the years we got a lot of different options. The first time Ecclesia lays eyes on Albaz is in Dogmatica Encounter, which is a normal trap card that by its effect we can see the part of the story they're trying to depict. Special summon one Dogmatica monster or Fall of Albaz from the hand, or add to your hand or special summon one Dogmatica monster or Fall of Albaz from the graveyard. After this encounter, we are met with a different faction that also lives in the same world as the Dogmatica tribe. They are, of course, the Tri Brigade. The Tri Brigade are a pact of beastmen and beast warriors that live in the Golgotha Desert. We'll know more about what they do in the next chapter that we talk about, but this time, we know something very, very simple. The Tri Brigade live in the desert next to the Dogmatica capital. Seeing the burning, flaming dragon falling from the sky in a deer servant, the tribe probably realized something is going on in the capital and wanted to see it for themselves. So, they run over to the capital with all of their members. We have the leader of the tribe, which is Tri Brigade Shureg, the ominous Omen, which can just banish a card on the field on summon. And if it's sent to the graveyard, you can add a Beast Warrior or Winged Beast from your deck, whose level is less or equal to the number of banished Beast Warrior, or Winged Beast monsters you have. This is essentially saying that Shureg recruits new beastmen from the desert into the Tri Brigade tribe. We have Rugal, the Silver Sheller. We have Tri Brigade Ferajit, the Baron Blossom, who's the sniper of the group. And of course, we have other members, Fractal, Karis, and Nerval. They all have similar effects where they can banish any number of Beast Warriors and or Winged Beast monsters from the graveyard to special summon one of those Tri-types from the extra deck with a link rating equal to the number of banished cards. Now this is a very unique mechanic in Yu-Gi-Oh! And this deck was obviously revolutionary for its time. Now, these characters are not all the characters of technically the Tri Brigade that live in the desert. These are a part of those tribes that were outcast and united together in the desert. And this is why they are tied so close to each other. Even being a little bit different, Beast from Beast Warrior to Winged Beast, they can still unite their powers and, banish those same tri-types from the grave to form and recruit new warriors into the fight. So after being introduced to Rugal, Shureg, Ferajit, Nerval, Karas, and Fractal, we have the Tri Brigade Airborne Assault, which is a quick play spell card. Now this artwork is beautiful and it depicts two very important characters in the story. On the left side, we have Fleur-de-Lis charging at the leader of the Tri Brigade, Shureg. You can target one Beast Warrior, or Winged Beast monster you control, and you special summon another Tri-type from the deck in defense position with a different type and attack less or equal to that monster, but their effects are negated. And also, you're locked into link monsters from the extra deck for the rest of the turn. Now, this card was originally a secret rare when it released, and this on its own has a pretty solid effect. It hasn't seen a lot of play because the deck was very good and consistent, but in terms of the story, we can see something is going on in this artwork. We can see the two faces of two characters that are usually hidden behind a mask. You can see Fleur-de-Lis' mask being broken, and same goes for Shureg. And it also feels like these two characters probably have a history, given the fact that they are two leaders of very strong factions living in proximity to each other, the Dogmatica and the Tri Brigade. They probably have met before and possibly have fought before. We know that Shureg has only one natural wing and one mechanical wing, so possibly Fleur-de-Lis was the one who took his other wing in the past. While these tribes are fighting, the Dogmatica Ashian are deployed. These are sort of like the royal guard of the Dogmatica Church. They are the brutes, they are the warriors, and eventually Ashian, as sort of like second in command or captain of the King's Guard to Maximus, eventually becomes ad libitum when the Dogmatica people turn into Despias later. Now this is very easy to understand where this effect comes from. If a Synchro, Fusion, Xyz, or Link monster is sent to the graveyard, you can special summon this card from your hand. If the Dogmatica people are doing what they're supposed to be doing, the Ashians will deploy themselves. If it is special summoned from the hand, you can target a Dogmatica card in the graveyard and add it to your hand. And when an opponent's monster declares an attack, you can make all your Dogmaticas gain 500 attack, essentially boosting their strength and protecting them. In Tri Brigade Standoff, we see the next part of the story. Now that the tribes have relaxed, the Ashians were deployed, and now basically the Tri Brigade are in a standoff versus the Dogmatica people. In the center, we obviously see Ecclesia protecting Albaz, as if to say, don't hurt this boy, there's something about him that I still don't know. The effect says that you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck except tri-types, and you can send one monster from your hand to the graveyard to add a Tri-Brigade monster from your deck to your hand with a different original type. If it is destroyed in the spell and trap zone, you can activate this effect. Your opponent cannot declare an attack this turn. And this is the part of the standoff that I like. Not being able to declare an attack, being in a truce, being in a peaceful state, and not continuing the fight. But the Ashian have different plans, and in Dogmatica Schism, the equip card, we can see the Ashian deploying their own dark powers and sealing off Ecclesia's seal Stigmata on her forehead. And it's also an equip, so that's interesting. It's sort of like a curse that is applied on a person. If the equipped monster is a Dogmatica monster, it actually gains attack equal to its level. And if not, it loses 200 attack for each Dogmatica monster you control. If you're a true believer, you gain a benefit from this spell. But if you're not, you will be weakened, which is, I think, extremely cool. Seeing this, and being surrounded by the beastmen from the desert around him, Albaz transforms for the second time, and this time to Brigand the Glory Dragon. Now, it is actually kind of interesting, the fusion materials that are listed on Brigand, because it requires Albaz and a level 8 or higher monster. Now, Ashian, I believe, is a level 8, but the Tri-Brigades don't really go up to that level. Brigand is also a beast, which is obviously a reference to the Tri-Brigade, and in the art you can see him holding Ecclesia after she's being cursed by Ashian. It cannot be destroyed by battle, and while you control it as a fusion summoned card, your opponent cannot target other monsters you control with monster effects. This card essentially protects your field, like it is protecting Ecclesia in the art. And during the end phase, of course, you can add a Tri-Brigade or Fall of Albaz, or special summon them directly from the deck. Seeing this dragon, the Tri-Brigade and the Dogmatica people revolt. And in the art of Tri-Brigade revolt, we can see Brigand losing control while the two tribes fight against each other. And of course, this is one of the most impactful Tri-Brigade cards that special summons any number of beast warriors and a winged beast to form a new monster. And this is perfect for the art and the story, because this is the time where the Tri-Brigade say, sort of like, screw it, and start fighting, because they want to get Ecclesia and Albaz out of the capital. And to wrap up this chapter of the story, Tri-Brigade Oath is the final card of this chapter. Now we can see Albaz and Ecclesia in the desert, in the Tri-Brigade's home. We can see Ferrijit laying her hand on Dogmatica Ecclesia as she's still recovering from the curse, and of course, the oath and the promise between Shureg and Albaz, asking them to venture into the desert under the protection of the Mercuriers to find a special someone also from this tribe. Do you know who this person might be? But besides that, the effective Tri-Brigade Oath says that you can target a link monster you control and you special summon a beast warrior, or winged beast monster with a different type from hand or grave. And if you control at least one of each, beast warrior, beast, and winged beast, you can banish it from the graveyard and target a spell or trap your opponent controls and negate its effects. Starting off with two cards that are actually not playable, they are tokens. We have the Albaz the Exile and of course Ecclesia the Exile. These tokens depict Ecclesia and Albaz under a huge skeleton of some sort of desert whale with a fire going, eating, but also not facing each other, actually facing away from each other. This is one of the first time that this couple is alone, scared in the desert. Ecclesia is far from home, and Albaz is not really sure what is going on. The token of Albaz the Shrouded says, does his name refer to a past buried in darkness or to a bright future? And Ecclesia's token says, a pure white heart to be filled with many memories. With thoughts of coming days in mind, the girl gifts a name to the boy. This is basically when Ecclesia names Albaz Albaz. This chapter of the story begins with the card Springand's Watch. They are of course watching through various mechanical telescopes, the couple making their way into the desert in search of something. The watch adds the great Sansi Gold Golgonda from the deck to your hand, which is of course our next card in the story, the Great Sea Sand Golgonda. It makes all Springand's Xyz monsters on the field gain 1000 attack points. Since this is their home, it makes perfect sense. Springand's Captain Sargass is the introduction to the tribe itself. This card is in your hand, field, or graveyard. You can target a Spring Hands Xyz monster you control and you attach this card to it as material. And as a quick effect during your opponent's turn, you can detach a material from an Xyz you control, then target a face-up card on the field, destroy it. This is Sargass essentially deploying the Spring Hands in battle and destroying their targets. We also have the great Spring Hands ship X Blower and the Spring Hands characters that are introduced in this part of the story. Rocky, Pador, and of course Branga. And we're also introduced to another character that is not part of the Spring Hands tribe. Her name is Kit. She's actually from the Tri Brigades. Ecclesia and Albaz were sent into the desert to actually search for Kit. And this is why she appears in this order of the pool of cards together with the Spring Hands tribes. In the card art of Tribe Drive, you can see Kit working away on some new weapons and some new mechanical stuff for the Tri Brigades. It is not an actual lore card, but it also depicts Kit and what she's actually doing there in the desert. So Kit was sent into the desert by Shureg to work together with the Spring Hands in building new weapons for the Tri Brigade for an upcoming war. And in Tri Brigade Rendezvous, we can actually see Kit discovering the tied up Ecclesia and Albaz, and around them, a bunch of sorry looking Spring Hands, not really sure what they're doing because Kit apparently is kind of mad. She recognizes the Mercurial bird above their head and said, "Hey, I know this bird. These guys might be here for me." Rendezvous is a quick play spell that targets any number of linked Beast Warrior, or Winged Beast monsters you control. Gains them 700 attack until the end of the turn. If a link Beast Warrior, or Winged Beast monster you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can banish this card from your graveyard instead. So essentially saying that Kit is the one that supplies the Tri Brigade with her power, but also protects them from afar. Now that Kit has released the couple from the ties of the Spring Hands, we have the Spring Hands Call Trap card that targets either a Spring Hands monster or Fallen of Albaz and special summon it, connecting the two together. And in the art, we can see Kit running away with the two, Kit being such an essential part to the story, but at the top of the artwork, we can see the Spring Hands kind of worried about a hole opening up in the sand. But while Kit releases the couple from the ties of the Spring Hands are not convinced and are not yet happy. And the Spring Hands brothers are sent on the attack. If this card is sent from the hand or deck to the graveyard, you can target a Spring Hand monster in the graveyard, except brothers, special summon it in defense position, and if this card is in your hand, field, or graveyard, you can target a Spring Hands Xyz and attach this card to it as material. And this card deploys the Spring Hands into battle. We quickly see Albaz figuring out the attack is on the way, and together with Kit and Ecclesia, turns into Sprint the Iron Dash Dragon. It's a machine dragon form, which of course coincides with the Spring Hands, and it includes Fall of Albaz and an effect monster special summoned this turn. And Sprint can move itself to a different column to destroy all face-up cards in that column, and during the end phase, of course, special summon a Spring Hands or Fall of Albaz from the deck. We can see the battle taking place in Spring Hands Blast, while the Spring Hands tribe try to fire out a lot of missiles to hit the running away form of Fallen of Albaz. And of course, we see the Merrymaker, which is now deployed to catch the couple with a ton of missiles in its barrels. But eventually, the Spring Hands relax. They understand that they are friends, not foes. And we have the Spring Hands Booty, which is a huge celebration of the peace between all the people in the desert now. If a face-up Xyz monster you control leaves the field by a card effect, you can target an effect monster your opponent controls, and neither player can activate that effect monster's effects on the field this turn. And you can send this face-up card on the field to the graveyard to activate the Great Sea of Golconda directly from the deck or grave. But now we have to cut away from the desert into the capital. And now we are at the beginning of a new age with the trap card Dogmatica Genesis. In the artwork, we can see a new beginning for the Dogmaticas, where we see Maximus anointing a new saint. We don't know her name or who she is, but we can pretty much figure out on our own that now that Ecclesia is no longer a part of the Dogmatica, there needs to be another saint to take her place as the 666th saint of the Dogmatica tribe. And now the Dogmatica has 666 saints in its orders. Maximus can finally start the ritual he's been preparing for in the art of Dogmatic Calamity. And it's an actual ritual because Dogmatic Calamity is used to ritual summon any Dogmatica ritual monsters. And you can also tribute monster from hand or field, or just send one monster with the exact level from your extra deck to the grave, essentially sending powers from the other world that Dogmatica is so opposed to begin the ritual and usher in a new type of monster. And that type of monster is the White Knight of Dogmatica. Fleur-de-lis armor corrupted by the powers of this very dark ritual Maximus just performed, which is a level 8 light spellcaster that lost all of its attack but kept his defense 2500, which is the same as Fleur-de-lis. It locks you out of the extra deck, and if your opponent activates a card or effect, you can send from your extra deck to the graveyard, and if you do, you look at your opponent's extra and do the same thing. And this card gains the attack to half of the combined attack of those monsters sent to the graveyard. So essentially, the White Knight, under Maximus's dark spell, reaches out into the opponent's world and gains powers by sending monsters from their extra deck. And this ritual is not only for the powers of the Dogmatica people. This is actually starting to turn the Dogmaticas into something else. And this is the time where we are introduced to the new building that is adorning the skyline of the Dogmatica nation. It is now the Theater of the Branded. The Theater of the Branded is the Despia field spell. During the main phase, you can fusion summon a level 8 or higher fusion from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as material. And if a non-fusion fairy monster you control leaves the field, you can target a level 8 or higher fusion monster and bring it back from the dead. Now, those non-fusion fairies are the Despias, which are essentially the people of Dogmatica that has turned into this dark fairy form because of Maximus's dark ritual. We have the comedy, the tragedy, ad libitum, which is new incarnation of Maximus's loyal guards, the Ashian, and of course, a figure that has emerged from a hole in the sky where the ritual takes place, Albaz, the Jester of Despia. This, of course, on normal or special, adds a branded spell or trap from your deck to your hand, and if a face-up fusion monster you control leaves the field by battle or card effect, while it's in the graveyard, you can target an effect monster your opponent controls, special summon Albaz, and then negate the targeted monster's effect until the end of the turn. And Albaz obviously is one of the most influential cards in the branded story. This is the first time we are met with the word branded, even before Albaz knows that he can use its own brand to use and access different types of powers. So Albaz probably knows a lot about Albaz that Albaz doesn't even know himself. The Dogmatica capital is forever changed. Maximus's ritual has spawned the Despias across the city, and with the theater rising from the ground, the skyline of the city is forever changed. Maximus is no longer, as he has also succumbed to the ritual that he has spawned, and is now taking the form of the Dramaturge of Despia. Very similar to Maximus, but a bit longer nails and some wings. And of course, Dramaturge shares the same stats as Maximus does, just flipped around. And similar to Maximus, he's also allergic to monsters from the extra deck, as whenever a monster leaves the extra deck and is summoned to the field, Maximus can't target it and negate its effects until the end of the turn. And when it's used as fusion material, it can summon itself back. The Dogmatica Nexus has also turned into a Despia statue and is now the Despian Proskinian, which, instead of being able to banish the fusion synchro Xyz and link monsters from the graveyard to summon itself, it can now bring them back from the dead. And of course, Fleur-de-lis armor is completely engulfed with Despian magic and is turned into the Despian Queritus that can basically zero out any monster that is not fusion, essentially spreading the magic all around. And Albaz is also taking charge with branded in red, as we can see the ritual in the sky is opening, Albaz's wings are forming, and Albaz, of course, transforming into Masquerade, the blazing dragon, his first of a few dragon forms across the story. And branded opening is the beginning of this chapter's story, as we see the Tri-Brigades fighting the Despias in control of the city. The city has completely transformed and the Despias are all over the place, and we can see Shureg trying to hold on to dear life in this battle. And of course, this card summons a Despia monster. This is what spawns the Despias in the city. Back in the desert, something extremely important to the story begins to happen. Branded in white is the first fusion spell for Fallen of Albaz, and it basically fuses from hand or field by using one dragon, but if using Fallen of Albaz specifically, the materials can also be banished from the graveyard. And this is the first time Albaz manages to actually control his transformation and transforms into Albion, the branded dragon. And the reason why he transforms is because in the great gold sea sand of Golconda appears a serpent, and it is none other than the supreme sovereign serpent of Golconda, the ruler of this desert, which gains 3000 attack if the great sand sea gold Golconda is on the field. In Screams of the Branded, we can see Albion charging towards the serpent, and in Judgment of the Branded, we can see the serpent being hit by a great wave of yellow lightning. In Springant's Interluder, which is the next card in the story, we can see what spawned that lightning, and we can see 3 mysterious figures on top of a cliff, standing above a few confused Springants. And those figures are immediately revealed. It's the Iris Sword Soul, which is of course Dogmatica Fleur-de-Lis, and the Golden Sword Soul, a duo made up of Theo and Aiden from the Dogmatica tribe. But the danger is not over yet. In the Art of Branded Bond, we can see Ecclesia reaching out to the flaming dragon as it sheds its skin. And we also find out the new form of Ecclesia taken in the desert, which is of course the incredible Ecclesia that can now share its powers between the Sword Soul tribe with the Golden Sword Soul and of course the Iris Sword Soul that can special summon themselves from the deck, and Ecclesia can also summon Fallen of Albaz from the deck, which connects the two forever. And in the Art of Branded Bond, we can see Albion shedding its orange coat to become Albion the Shrouded Dragon, which is always considered Fallen of Albaz while in the field or in the graveyard, and can send branded spells and traps or Fallen of Albaz itself from the deck to bring itself back into the deck and draw 1 card. Essentially, this is another base form of Fallen of Albaz, and it's not going to be the last one. And we get a reveal of the final Tri-Brigade member, up until now at least. We'll get another one later in the story, and it's Tri-Brigade Bearbrum, the Rampant Rampager. This is of course Kit, but with a new machine she's created in the desert with the Springants, and it's also a Link monster. And it's probably one of the better ones as it can summon multiple Tri-Brigade monsters from being banished, and of course searches for Tri-Brigade Revolt, which is the core card of the deck. And now we actually leave the desert onto a new plane, and this is basically the story being told from Iris Sword Soul's perspective. And we are heading over into the Sword Soul Summit. Not before Branded in High Spirits, which concludes this part of the story, as we see Ecclesia flying on the wings of Albion the Shrouded Dragon away from the desert as everybody cheers. And of course, this card can search any Fallen of Albaz card from the deck as long as you manage to combine a monster in your hand with another monster of the same type, being Fusion level 8 and having 2500 attack or defense, sending them to the graveyard and then searching that card. But in the Sword Soul Summit, we are met with our new protagonists, Taya, Moye, Longyuan, Chanjang, and the 2 leaders of the tribe, Chengying and Qishao. In the Art of Sword Soul Emergence, we see Theo, Aiden, and the wounded Fleur-de-Lis arriving at the Sword Soul Summit. And this card searches any Sword Soul monster. We can see the Great Sword Soul Summit, which is a revive spell for the Sword Soul tribe, and we see the Sword Soul Assessment trap card, which depicts the leader of the tribe assessing whether Ecclesia's intentions are pure of heart. And with the effect, we can kind of understand what that ritual entails. Target 1 face-up monster you control, banish up to 5 Sword Soul cards and/or worm monsters from your graveyard, and if you do, that monster gains 300 attack for each card banished this way. And as we can see, Ecclesia is gaining those Sword Soul powers, which is pretty cool. And we're also introduced to the Ice Jades. We have Acti, Tinola, Tremora, Adrian, Cosmoclore, and the Ice Jade creation Kingfisher, all of which are members of the Ice Jade Society that live deep within the Sword Soul Summit and are the ones who give the Sword Soul their powers. And in the Art of Ice Jade Cradle, that lets you add an Ice Jade monster from your deck to your hand with the different names than cards you already control or in your graveyard, we can see the Ice Jades taking care of a wounded Fleur-de-Lis. In the last episode, we talked about Fleur's armor in the Art of White Knight of Dogmatica being burned by Despian magic. We can finally see what actually happened to Fleur herself, and we can see the wounds inflicted on her by Maximus's ritual and the Ice Jades healing her. And this is why in the art of Sword Soul Emergence, we see the trio, and of course the wounded fleur-de-lis, so desperately trying to get to the Sword Soul Summit to heal their wounds. And lastly, in the Ice Jade part of the story, we can see the Ice Jade's note, Enyon Cradle, which is the field spell that depicts the realm of the Ice Jades. It can add an Ice Jade from grave or banishment on activation, and in the art we can also see in the bottom left corner Ecclesia and Albion reaching the depth of the summit. And now we turn into the action with Sword Soul Blackout. This artwork depicts something rather disturbing, with Long Yuan opening the gates to the Despias to invade the Sword Soul Summit. Even though this card actually destroys cards by destroying your own Worm monster, we can actually see ad libitum of Despia reaching inside of the Sword Soul Summit through a portal that seems very familiar. And in the art of Ice Jade Erosion that follows it, we can see Long Yuan combining Moye's swords with his own to turn into a new sinister form. And as you can see by the effect, you can target one face-up card your opponent controls, destroy one Ice Jade monster you control, and if you do, negate the targeted card's effects until the end of this turn. If a face-up water monster you control leaves the field by an opponent's card effect, you can add to your hand or special summon another Ice Jade from deck. And back in the capital, we get a swift image of what is happening there. It's a funeral procession. You can see the figures formerly from the Dogmatica tribe in the background, depicted as very scary skulls. And of course, White Relic of Dogmatica, a new sinister form of the former saint we've seen in the art of Dogmatica Genesis. But the battle in the summit begins. With the art of Sword Soul Strife, we can see the sinister form of Long Yuan charging into the leader of the Sword Souls tribe, Cheng Ying. And another invasion is beginning in the summit, which is depicted in the art of Branded Disciple, the continuous trap featuring Aluber's new winged form, Ecclesia, and Albion the Shrouded Dragon, watching him invade the Ice Jade Cradle. Interestingly enough, in the effect of Branded Disciple, any effect of a monster with 0 attack is negated once per turn if you control a Fiend fusion monster of level 8 or higher. Which means that if the effect of Queritus, for example, has resolved and zeroed out the attack of your opposing monster, you can also use the Despian powers to negate their effects as well. This part of the story, we learn a little bit more about Aluber through his token, which is the next card in this set. It's Aluber the Dogmatic. It is not presented here as it is in the story. It's definitely not in the Ice Jade's note. It's actually behind a very beautiful stained glass window, probably somewhere in Dogmatica, as the stained glass seemed to feature the symbol of the Dogmatica people. But this is the first time we see Aluber without his mask, and the token says, "A thing separated from the abyss. It mocked the light and deceived the darkness." Extremely cryptic, like the Fallen of Albaz token, but I think this art is just so cool. Continuing to Branded Lost, one of the most important cards of the actual Branded deck, we can see Aluber tying up Albion in his weird strings of holes. And flashing back to the capital, we can see in Dogmatica Macabra, which is another ritual spell of the Dogmaticas, Theo, Aiden, and Iris going back to the capital to fight the Despias that remain. And they have actually been lured into that capital. Now, it's kind of interesting to see that this is, of course, a ritual card for Dogmaticas. You must also tribute monsters from hand or field or banish fusion or synchro monsters from the graveyard. And of course, using the powers of the dead is no news for Despias. But also, if White Knight of Dogmatica and White Relic of Dogmatica are on the field, you can then look at either player's extra deck and send one monster from it to the graveyard. So the ritual is successful, and it's more successful if the actual ritual has already been done. As Iris tries to fight the forces of Dogmatica, and we can see her striking Dramaturge with her yellow powers of lightning. In the art of Branded Banishment, we can actually see that Iris has been captured by the dragonic form of Despian Queritus. And it's also ridden by the White Relic of Dogmatica, as we can see in the top right corner. And this, of course, brings back a Despia or fusion monster from the grave, and then uses it to fusion summon again. And in Ice Jade Curse, which is one of my all-time favorite artworks in the story, we can see the shattered body of Cosmoclore with the small Adrian next to it. before she ascended into better and stronger forms. Now, the real battle and the real fusion begins and is about to end in the Ice Jade Cenote. In the Art of Branded Sword, we can actually see a new form of Fallen of Albaz, Mirror Jade, combined with the Ice Jade powers, striking the newly formed sinister Longyuan. And Aluber, who is also nearby, transforms now into another dragon form of his own, Lubellion the Searing Dragon, which requires Fallen of Albaz and a dark monster. But this is not Fallen of Albaz fusing, this is actually Aluber fusing with Albaz's powers. So their powers begin to mix a little bit. And of course, with Mirror Jade and Lubellion finally in play, Branded Fusion is formed, and the two powers are just too strong to be separated, and they fuse together to create Alba Lanatus, the Abyss Dragon, which is the ultimate form of Albaz and Aluber's struggles. And this requires Fallen of Albaz and one or more dragon monsters. So in this case, it's Fallen of Albaz's new form, which is Mirror Jade, who's not a dragon, but Lubellion is a dragon. So it's essentially Aluber and Albaz combined. And of course, this card cannot be used as fusion material because it's already a lore-accurate fusion of two fusions. And of course, in the end phase, it can search a polymerization or a fusion normal spell from your deck to your hand, signifying its importance. And on the surface, we have the Art of Branded Lost. We can see a very gruesome battle between the Despia forces invading the capital and the Sword Soul forces trying to protect it. And of course, led by the incredible Ecclesia, who's swinging her hammer. This artwork is just a masterpiece. But the invasion is not over, because in the artwork of Dogmaticaturgy, we can see Dramaturge opening up a hole in the summit to show Ecclesia that they've captured her mentor, sister Iris, and that they have her in the capital, basically trying to lure Ecclesia back. And finally, the fusion is broken. And in the Art of Branded Expulsion, we can see Albaz being expelled from the Abyss Dragon's body. And this is actually a super lore-accurate card, because the effect, of course, is that it requires you to attribute a fusion monster and then target two monsters in either graveyard or banishment and special summon them one to each field, essentially signifying the Abyss Dragon breaking up and summoning Aluber and Albaz back into the world. But it is not the same Albaz that you've known. It's a new form of Albaz, Albaz the Ashened. And Albaz the Ashened is, of course, Fallen of Albaz while on the field or in the graveyard, and it also gains attack for each of your Fallen level 8 fusion monsters that are in your graveyard. We are accompanied by Kit and Captain Sargas from the Spring Ants tribe, and we are headed to the Land of Iron. The Land of Iron is the land of the Disc Coliseum, which is a big coliseum where fighters fight for dominance. We are introduced to the members of the Therions, who are elite fighters in the ring, each one a different type. Therion Bull, Ain, Therion Reaper, Fume, Therion Duke, Yule, Therion Lily, Borea, and of course, the reigning champion with the belt, Therion King, Regulus. Each one of them can target a Therion monster or another monster from their type in their graveyard, special summon themselves, and then equip that monster to them. Essentially, they are tagging out in the ring. Every time a Therion member has fallen, the next Therion in line can take over, acquire some of its powers, and enter the ring to fight the next contender. And this is exactly what the Therions do. They attach a fallen Therion member from the graveyard to themselves, and then they gain one of its powers. So for example, if another Therion attaches Therion King Regulus to itself, it will gain the effect where you can send a Therion monster card from your hand or face-up field to negate a card effect, but also gain 700 attack points. So this archetype is just incredibly cool. And we also have Tribe Drive. Remember, we talked about Tribe Drive in the second chapter of the story, and this is a trap card, a normal trap card that is actually external to this story, but it does feature in the artwork Kit working on some secret components in the desert of Golganda. And it's also kind of tied with how the Therions work. If you have 3 or more different monster types on your field, you can choose 3 monsters from your deck with 3 different types from each other, but the same types as the monsters you control. Then your opponent randomly chooses one for you to either add them to the hand or special summon it, and you place the rest of the monsters at the bottom of the deck in any order. And now we're introduced to a new version of Kit. It's actually Springans Kit. She was formerly, of course, a member of the Tri-Brigade and had Tri-Brigade related effect, but now Springans Kit is actually a new supporter of Fallen of Albaz. If you have a fusion monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz as a material on your field or in your graveyard, you can special summon Kit for free. And if this card is normal special summoned, you can add to your hand one of your branded spells and traps that is currently banished in your deck or in your graveyard, and then place a card from your hand to the bottom of the deck. So Kit, of course, is extremely resourceful, and she can finally recur your spent branded spells and traps. So of course we talked about the Disc Coliseum. This is the arena of the Therions, and when activated, of course, you can add a Therion monster from deck to hand, and check this cool battle effect out. Once per turn, if your monster would be destroyed by battle, you can send a Therion card or one Endless Engine Argero system from your deck to the graveyard instead. Once per turn, when a monster is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can target a Therion monster in the graveyard and add it to your hand. So essentially continuing the battle arena theme, every time a Therion falls, you get something back out of it. And with Therion Charge, you can send a Therion card, accept Therion Charge or Argero System from your hand or face-up spell and trap zone to the graveyard and draw 2 cards. And now we need to talk about why Kit and Sargass are here. So there's obviously a huge ongoing war in the city of Dogmatica right now between the invading Despia forces and the Tri-Brigade, who have now tried to fight them in their own capital. And Kit, being the weapon builder and tech mech of the Tri-Brigade tribe, was sent to the Springans tribe and eventually here to the Disc Coliseum to find and create the powers to fuel the endgame weapon for the Tri-Brigades. We'll talk about that a little bit further down the line. And now we can see in these 2 trap cards, Therion Cross and Therion Stand Up, Sargass making its way through the gauntlet that is the Disc Coliseum, fighting each one of the Therions, eventually reaching the king himself, who's the reigning champion. And in Therion Stand Up, we can actually see Kit yelling at Sargass, "Stand up, dude!" to make sure he doesn't lose the fight and that they get what they need. Eventually, we are learned of this engine system that is powering the Disc Coliseum, the Endless Engine Argero system. And seeing that Therion King has now fallen, it sends a message to the skies to spawn down a few living forms of thunder. And in Sprite Starter, we can actually see the Argero system deploying those spirits from the sky. Sprite Starter, of course, special summon 1 Sprite monster from the deck, but you lose life points equal to its original attack. And then you're locked into level, rank, or link 2s. And sprites are just extremely iconic. Sprite Blue, Sprite Jet, Sprite Red, Carrot, and Sprite Pixies make up the forms that have spawned from the skies to try and stop Kit and Sargass from taking the powers of the Disc Coliseum. In the Art of Gamma Burst, we can see the Argero system actually boosting the powers of those sprites. And of course, as portrayed by the effect, all of your level, rank, or link 2 monsters gained 1400 attack and defense. In a last-ditch effort, we also have another Therion joining the mix, who's Therion Empress Lasia. And lastly, using Regulus's fallen body, the Argero system creates Therion Irregular, which is Therion King's body combined with the Sprite Lightnings. We of course also have Sprite Elf, and finally the big boss of the sprites, Gigantic Sprite, fighting the battle. But as we can see in Sprite Smashers, Irregular is going to charge at the Gigantic Sprite, and eventually in Sprite Double Cross, we can actually see Sargass, Irregular, and Gigantic Sprite fighting, and the Double Cross actually means that Therion King Regulus, which is supposed to be on the Sprite side, has actually combined forces with the new champion Sargass to take down the Gigantic Sprite. And the end goal and the result of Kit's hard work is actually Sprite Sprint. We can see Sprite Sprint is such a weird character. It's of course another Link 2 from the Sprite family that also has a pretty powerful effect of sending a level 2 monster from your deck to the graveyard. Not by coincidence, Tri-Brigade Kit is also a level 2. But we can see Kit in the background feeling a bit anxious but also happy because her mission is complete. We can see Kit's makeshift coat and 2 canisters, one of blue sprite lightning and of course one with red, as these are the 2 sprite forces that have spawned from the sky. So essentially with Sprite Sprint, and also with a hint to Sprint the Iron Dash Dragon, which is another Fallen of Albaz fusion back from the days of Golconda, we can see that Kit has eventually managed to capture the sprite powers she actually came to the Disc Coliseum for. And now, with these thunder and lightning powers captured within Sprite Sprint, Kit and the new champion Sargath can finally return back and report back to the Tri-Brigades saying, hey, we got what we needed and we can finally build our endgame weapon. And our story in this chapter begins in a rather sad image of Ecclesia holding her fallen sister mentor Fleur-de-Lis as she is dead in the capital of Dogmatica. We've seen in chapter 3 that Dramaturge actually was able to capture Fleur in the battle in the artwork of Branded Banishment and Branded Retribution, and eventually she has succumbed to her wounds and fallen, and this is one of the first dead characters of the story. We can also see the white relic of Dogmatica hovering over Ecclesia, embodying the spirit of the original Saint Quem and trying to comfort her from afar. But honestly, this beautiful artwork is just a very sad start to this chapter. And following that, we actually get a little bit of a backstory. And in this part of the story, we are met with another token to help us enrich the story. And this is the Virtuous Vestals. And it depicts Fleur and a much younger Ecclesia before an important ceremony. You can see the relationship between the two and the warm gaze upon their faces as they stare at each other with, a mentor-sister-like connection. In the background, you can also see the priests of Dogmatica that in the art of White Relic of Dogmatica has turned into demons. But the token gives us a little bit more flavor about the two now that we've seen, unfortunately, that Fleur has passed. Sometimes like a kind sister, sometimes like a strict teacher. The bond is always there, even while far apart. But there's not a lot of time to waste here. The White Relic of Dogmatica lures Ecclesia into the belly of the theater to begin an evil transformation. They have finally caught the girl they were looking for. And here we are met with 4 kings from a fallen realm, 4 dragon kings that have come from the abyss. Bestial Magnamut, Bestial Baldrake, Bestial Serenir, and the Bestial Druisworm. They are all spawned from the sky by the new evil version of Ecclesia, who's Cartesia, who can now perform fusion summons all on her own, essentially embodying the powers that Fallen of Albaz and Aluber already had, which is extremely powerful in this world and in this story. Joining them is another form of a disgusting dragon, Granguignol, the Dusk Dragon, who is actually formed from the stained glass shards from the Dogmatica churches and the fallen bodies of the people of the city in Dogmatica. And this dragon can send any light or dark monster who's level 6 or higher from the deck or extra deck to the graveyard, and can also tag out to a Despia from the extra deck and Dogmatica from the deck, showing the duality of this dragon and this powerful magic that essentially connects the Dogmaticas to the Despias in 2 different sides of the story. And of course, in the art of Branded Regained, we can see amazing power that Ecclesia, or rather Cartesia, has over these Dragon Kings as she basically pets Druisworm. And another transformation is beginning in a few other places in our story. First, in the art of Branded Beast, which can, of course, tribute a Bestial to destroy a card, but in the art, we can see Aluber transforming into a new forms with horns on its head and some lightning strikes around it. And in the decisive battle of Golconda, we can see Albaz has finally made his way into the capital after only in chapter 3 being expelled from Albalendidus' body and making his way back to the capital to save Ecclesia, who was kidnapped. And up above, we can actually see a huge dragon form above the Theater of the Branded, which we'll learn about in a second. We can also see the Abyss Dragon Sword Soul, who is Longyuan's fallen body with the Serpent of Golconda, making its way to fight the remainder of the Ice Jades in the Ice Jades Note. And after that, we are met with the ultimate bestial weapon system, Alba Loss. This is a level 12 bestial monster. It's a dragon with 3500 attack and defense, and it definitely resembles the Dogmatica Nexus, but in a more draconic and powerful form. And it also negates the effects of all face-up ritual, fusion, synchro exes, and link monsters, which is very similar to what we've had so far with Dogmatica Nexus and then Despian Proskinian. But most importantly, the final form of Aluber, in this case, is the Bestial Lubellion, ultimate form that can search any bestial monster from the deck, essentially allowing it to spawn bestials from the sky to help with this battle. And deep down in the theater of the branded, Maximus has put himself into a chamber, and Dogmatica Matrix, which is the last ritual of the Dogmaticas, is beginning, that we'll talk about in a second. Surprisingly enough, only in this part of the story are we officially met with Tri-Brigade Mercurier, who is finally handed to Albaz himself as he prepares for battle. And in the art of Tri-Brigade Showdown, we can finally see Albaz and his allies assembling outside of the capital to prepare for this final battle. And its effect explain how things will work. If a beast, beast warrior, or winged beast monster is special summoned to your field, you can target a banished Tri-Brigade and add it to your hand. After damage calculation, if your Tri-Brigade monster is battled an opponent's monster, you can return that opponent's monster to the hand. So essentially, again, a very lore-accurate battle spell. And while the ritual is complete, we are met with the ultimate form, the Dogmatica Alba Zoa. This is the end game of what Maximus has been trying to achieve. He has finally been able to turn himself into a god. And continuing with the theme of the bosses of the story, at least from the Dogmatica side, it makes all your Dogmatica monsters unaffected by Xyz, Synchro, Link, and Fusion monsters, and can send a whopping big number of cards from your opponent's extra deck to the graveyard by making your opponent choose and sending 2 cards from the extra deck for each card they have in their hand. While in the capital, we finally have the final form of Adrian for now, with Ice Jade Gamir Adrian, who is now the ultimate transformation of the young Adrian from the beginning of the story. And lest we forget, Ice Jade Manifestation, which shows us the final boss battle between the 3 bosses, Adrian, the Ice Jade Creation, and the Longyuan fighting it out for control of the Cenote. And now we finally have a depiction of what Kit was trying to achieve. In the art of Springans Tally-Ho, we can see Springans champion Sargass, the new rank 8 Xyz monster upgrade to the Sargass normal, firing a lot of Springans missiles at an unknown target. And in the art of Gigantic Thundercross, we can finally see what the target was. It was the Bestial Alba Loss. And you can also see the Bestial Lubellion flying away from this exploding target. And the other shot that you see in this artwork, the blue and red lightning, was actually fired from the upgraded final version of Shrek. Tri-Brigade Arms Bicephalus II is the Tri-Brigade boss monster with the ultimate endgame weapon created by Kit, who is able to harness the powers of the sprites and bring it to the land of the Abyss. Combining the powers of the two, they are able to defeat the huge ultimate bestial weapon system, and we also get a nice sneak peek with the Tri-Brigade token, which just features a beautiful picture of the entire Tri-Brigade army with the text, "Ready, Aim." Just iconic. And while these 2 bosses are working hard at defeating the final boss, Kit has been working hard on creating a new vehicle for Albaz, which is also a new Albaz transformation, and it's Rinbrum, the Striking Dragon. And it's essentially a fusion of Fallen of Albaz and the Tri-Brigades, as it requires Fallen of Albaz plus a beast, beast warrior, or winged beast monster. And it can also negate fusion, synchro, Xyz, or link monsters, and then return a monster from the field to the hand. But when in the graveyard, it can also summon a Fall of Albaz or itself, which is another really interesting lore tidbit. So Rinbrum is now charging at the Bestial Lubellion, realizing that this is the moment to strike. But as we can see in the art of Branded Befallen, which is actually a bestial trap, but we'll talk about that maybe a little bit later, we can see Cartesia flying on the wings of Granguignol to save the Bestial Lubellion. She's so brainwashed that she feels like she needs to sacrifice herself in front of Fallen of Albaz to protect the bestial forces. She of course is hit, and in the art of Light of the Branded, we can see Cartesia falling to her death, with Fallen of Albaz just jumping from Rinbrum to try and save her. And in a beautiful moment of ultimate fusion power, the 2 are combined, and with the heightened emotions, they create a new monster. It's the brightest, blazing branded king, Albion the Sanctifier Dragon, which requires Fallen of Albaz and a light spellcaster monster. And of course, it can too bring back, as you all probably know, monsters back from the dead. But alongside that, the Bestials are not done. Bestial powers have also corrupted the Dogmatica Albazoa and has turned it into a most horrible monster, the Bestial Despater. And it is the father of all things evil and bestial. The White Relic, Quem, or the 666th Saint has used its power to revive the fallen body of Fleur, turning her into a Despia, because that is the only power strong enough to bring people back from the dead. And she now, as seen in the art of Sword Soul Punishment, can fight the final boss. It's funny that Fleur has started this story as Maximus's right hand, and she's ultimately the one to eventually get the job done and end his rule of oppression. And we also get a beautiful image in Tri-Brigade Roar of Bucephalus without the mask, injured and tired from the battle, with Bestial Despater above its head. While the battle is over, the war is not. And in the art of Etude of the Branded, we can see Aluber back in his rather human form, with his servant ad libitum kneeling down, essentially saying that the battle has been lost. But it's interesting because the effect says that during either player's turn, you can immediately after this effect resolves synchro summon a synchro monster using monsters you control as material, including a dragon monster, essentially depicting the transformation that took place between Albazoa and the Bestial Despater. And while you control a Bestial, banish any monster your opponent would use for ritual, tribute, or fusion, synchro, or link summon, which is rather flavorful given the extra deck hate that Dogmaticas possess, and now eventually Aluber as well. And we get a few closing shots of the world after, or maybe some of them even before, the stories that just took place. We have the Fallen of Argyros, which is a level 2, sort of like armor of the Bestial Lubellion, wearing the Sprite coat and filled with the Sprite thunder and lightning powers. And we also have that Argyros going back to the Disc Colosseum in the art of Blink Out, where we see all the fallen bodies of the Therions, but this sort of like bestial sprite thunder power may be planning on reviving some of them. As stated in the effect, it returns a link monster from the field to the extra deck, and then it revives one of the monsters that was used as link material for it. We have Ran Adrian, which is now the new final resting form of Adrian back in the Ice Jade Cenote, and another hint at a possible future war with Million Century Ice Prison, where we can see Ice Jade Ran Adrian, but above, deep within the ice, the body of Longyuan, waiting for maybe a million years to be awoken. We of course have Quem. Quem, I think, is not a vision of the future or the present, it's actually a vision of the past, the original first Saint of Dogmatica, Quem, who is also a Dogmatica, but also a Despia, which hints at, of course, the dark future that we know this story took place with. The Bestial Aluber is the endgame form of Aluber for now, and this card also carries the name Fallen of Albaz while on the field or in the graveyard, which maybe is a hint to the crystal that Aluber holds in his hand. This was his goal from the beginning, to steal the crystal, which he has achieved. So now he possesses the ultimate fusion powers that Fallen of Albaz has held up until now. So maybe that's why his name becomes Fallen of Albaz. And in the art of Blackcoat Laughs, we can see that Aluber has actually abandoned his throne and is probably out plotting somewhere else. And in the final artwork of the entire story, card number 177, we have New Frontier. If your opponent special summons a ritual, fusion, synchro, xyz, or a link monster, you can either add Fallen of Albaz or a monster that mentions it from deck to hand, or special summon an Albaz or a monster that mentions it from your hand. This is a rather beautiful closing shot of Kit waving goodbye at Albaz and Ecclesia as they fly away into a new future, a new journey, and a new frontier. And in the alt arts of Albaz, Ecclesia, Cartesia, and Aluber, we can see some of their future. I also made a video about that back in the day when the artworks were revealed, so go ahead and check out the meanings behind those. And finally, Dogmatic Calamity Albaz system. Card number 000. This card, we don't really know where it lands within the story. It could be way before as the ultimate dragon god, but it can also be an alternate ending to the story. It requires Fallen of Albaz and 6 monsters in your graveyard with different names, and it must be fusion summoned. It can attack all monsters your opponent controls once each, and it cannot declare an attack unless it sends a card from your extra deck to the graveyard as cost. Once per turn, if you control this fusion summoned monster and you have 6 or more fusion monsters in your graveyard with different names that mention Fallen of Albaz, you can send all cards in both players' extra decks to the graveyard. So this kind of hints at being an endgame boss, right? If all of your fusion monsters that mention Fallen of Albaz are already dead, only then this card becomes really good. But I would like to hear your thoughts about that in the comments below. Thank you so much for taking a 5-chapter journey with me. And if you haven't watched the cinematic lore movie, it's only 15 minutes, go ahead and check that as well. Already at 250,000 views. Thank you so much for taking this journey with me. Subscribe, like, and I'll see you in the next one.